Welcome, Maya.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for coming.
Anytime.
Yeah. It was a bit of an epic journey today.
Had a very epic journey today.
What happened?
So what happened was I woke up in the morning and I was prepared to get on an airplane.
Yes.
To a city called San Francisco.
In Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles. And well, I guess they chose today to repave the San Francisco airport.
The San Francisco airport.
And so what happened was we kept getting those lovely notifications saying, your flight has been delayed. Your flight's been delayed again. Your flight's been delayed again. And the new time that they said, and this was all like 7 in the morning, would have in theory gotten me here in time. But I did not trust your airport. And I did not trust whoever was texting my assistant, telling us about the gate changes and such. So I actually had 2 live events that I was supposed to do this afternoon. One was a CNET live Facebook thing, and one was a Scrib Chat, also a live thing. And I did what anyone would do. I put my mother and my assistant in the car, and we drove to San Francisco. And we had some pretty upset people at the other 2 commitments, but I mean, to be honest, I know that y'all purchased tickets, and for some of you, this may be your first time, here or learning more about the JCC, and I wanted to make sure that we were not a slave to the airport or the airline. So it was. It's my assistant's literally first week on the job, and she just spent 6 hours with my mother in a car, and that's a great. Where is my mom? I don't see her.
I think your mom is
hi,
here.
Mom.
Hi, Mom.
Yeah. And my assistant didn't quit yet, so we made it through the trip without her quitting.
Caroline, are you?
Yes, Caroline's also
still
here.
There.
Yeah.
Great, and I think we have a lot of members of your family here tonight.
Yes, I have very deep ties to the Bay. My uncle has lived in San Francisco my whole life, and I spent a lot of really good time, a lot of really good memories with my uncle my whole life here. And then the other branch of my Bay Area family is in San Jose, and that's right, the hoe. So unfortunately, most of my San Jose family is vacationing elsewhere, but my cousin Rebecca's here, and actually my ex-husband is from San Jose as well. So my in-laws are up here. Like I'm a Bay Area person, and some of the worst memories I have of San Francisco was trying to find a parking spot with a nursing toddler screaming at me in the back of the car, because you cannot find parking in San Francisco.
It is challenging.
But I love this city, don't get me wrong, and I'm a huge Warriors fan. Yeah.
That's great. So I want to, we have a lot to talk about.
Everybody just got really excited about the Warriors.
Yes.
I know.
We are also excited about the Warriors.
Let's talk about that.
I don't think there's a Warrior here tonight. If you are a Warrior.
Steph Curry, if you're
you
here, don't be shy.
No, I see no hands. Well, that's a shame.
Indeed. That would have been worth the ride and then some. Drove all the way to San Francisco for Steph Curry.
So we have a lot to talk about, and I want to get to a lot, but I want to start with this amazing new book, #1 New York Times bestseller.
That's right, we just found out today. Is there a glare on these glasses, by the way? No? Because I can take them off and partially see. Okay, I just want to make sure. It's right, okay.
So congratulations on that achievement, and I'm wondering if you can tell us in your quick explanation of what this book is and why and how it came to be.
Well, anyone who knows me knows that I never give quick explanations of anything, but I can make a good college try. So I wrote this book for 10 to 18-year-old girls, or anyone who ever has been a 10 to 18-year-old girl, or anyone, as you said, who cares about any person who's ever been in that age range. And what I did was I was not inspired to write this book. I was asked to write this book after Jill Santopolo at Penguin read an article I wrote for my website, Grok Nation, about being a late bloomer and playing one on TV. And she liked the way I spoke about being a late bloomer without it being like political or religious. And she said, would you like to write a book like that for girls about, dating and sex and things like that? And I said, yes, but can I also write about the other aspects of being female besides just, sex and dating? So from a scientific perspective, that's what I did. I kind of go through everything from, puberty and hormones to how the brain learns, how our body grows, how stress affects our body. Yes, how we form intimate relationships with friends and with lovers, how to make an impact in the world, and one of my favorite chapters, how to cope with difficult things. And I talk very personally about, some of the challenges I've had. That was not a short explanation, but it was an explanation.
And I'm curious about your choice of strong, smart, and spectacular.
Right. Why didn't I choose sassy, sexy, and sweet? We chose those words very, very specifically. One thing I'm very careful about in general, and I had a YouTube video that people seem to watch a lot recently about that. I'm very careful with language, and we wanted to be very careful with language. When I think about what I wish for myself, what I would wish for girls in this age range, those three characteristics really sum up, notions of strength, which can be emotional resilience, as well as physical strength, intelligence, and this sort of, notion of eccentricity and individuality, which we use the word spectacular to describe. And I do speak about, the expectations of women and girls, to be sweet, saucy, and sexy in the book, and also elsewhere. But yeah, we chose those for those reasons. And
while writing this book, was there anything that you were surprised to learn or discover? What was sort of the most, part of it?
That I'm 41 years old and I'm still shy about talking about sex. Obviously there are arenas where I'm not uncomfortable or, where I'm more comfortable. But yeah, writing about it was hard because I was such a late bloomer. And when you're writing a book for an age range like 10 to 18, you really have to, you have to favor the younger side. I've been asked some specific questions. Why didn't you include discussions of how young's the youngest person here, by the way? It would help to know.
Do we have anyone under 12?
There's a 12-year-old? Is she with an adult that knows her? Okay, good. No, I prepare for an education tonight, young lady. No, but I've been asked, specific things like, why didn't you cover this very, very heavy topic? Or why didn't you cover more complicated I'm being delicate, more complicated aspects of lack of consent and things like that. And I said, I really wanted to err on the side of making it really palatable, for the younger set that might be reading this. And, the way I was at 10 is the way not a lot of girls are at, girls are different now, and of course, not all girls are different. I'm sure there are still, girls who at 14 sleep with stuffed animals like I did, possibly also at 16 and maybe also at 41. But I think I really wanted to kind of strike that balance. Yeah.
So when I was in the age range, my mom gave me the What's Happening to My Body book for girls, and I went and I kind of read it alone, and I was like, I got this, I understand. And when I was reading your book, I thought, okay, this is like What's Happening Plus, which was really helpful. And I'm wondering, did you have a similar book when you were in that age range that you turned to?
My mother just said no. No. Let's see. The first book that I saw that I wish that we had was actually in, Rebecca, where are you? I can't see you.
Cousin
Rebecca. Sorry, totally embarrassing you. I was in Rebecca's home, and it was a really cool book, and it was like, those like illustrations that are done with like torn paper kind of illustrations, like the kind of, and it was all these different animals, like here's 2 chickens, and here's an egg, and I was like, oh, that's good. I was like well into maybe my teens, possibly early 20s when I found this in their bookshelf, and I said to Rebecca's mom, to my aunt, I was like, what's this book? And she's like, didn't your mother show you this book? I said, no, we had no such book in the Bialik house. And no, but obviously I had classes in school, which I didn't understand. And because I was such a late bloomer, honestly, I think my mother feels like I'm, publicly shaming her for not having the sex talk with me when I was 10. But what it really was that I was such a late bloomer that I think she was kind of relieved. She came from a very religious home, very conservative home, and I think she was relieved that I was showing no signs of becoming a woman until I was like 16. So she didn't have to talk about it. I didn't have to talk about it. You know, on the show Blossom buys feminine products.
Oh, I know.
Yes, and that was a healthy 3 or 4 years before I did that in real life.
So
true story.
So was there? What was it like to perform through things that you were also going through?
I should have gotten an Emmy then, if you ask me. I'm just kidding. What was it? I mean, you know, I knew what tampons were, and I knew, you know, the cultural expectations that it's embarrassing, and also, you know, the Blossom character was raised without a mother in the home, so, you know, it was more kind of about that, and it wasn't like there was like a lot of detail to it. It was more kind of playing the comedy of it. But yeah, I had my first kiss on television. You know, I know, it's really weird. So yeah, there were a lot of, but I was kind of used to that, and you know, I was used to being kind of the last one to get jokes. I was used to being the last one in my group to, you know, hit all sorts of, you know, honestly arbitrary kind of, you know, milestones in terms of dating. Again, think about that 12-year-old. So yeah, I was kind of used to that, and you know, there were a lot of things about me that that I, you know, tried to appreciate and did appreciate about being different, and you know, that was okay too. And you know, something also that we didn't want to overemphasize in the book is that it's not the right way to be a late bloomer. And you know, after I wrote this kind of very heartfelt section about, you know, what it was like to be a late bloomer and how much people teased me, and like I did get breasts eventually, even though they said I wouldn't. You know, Jill said to me, you know, I really think we need to add a section about how it's also okay to not be a late bloomer. And I think that kind of, you know, it sets the tone for kind of the whole book. That, you know, and this is my 3rd book I've written, and my first book was about my experience parenting, and I literally said in the foreword, I don't know how you should parent. I know how I parent, and I wrote a book about it. And my 2nd book was a vegan family cookbook, and I said, I don't know how you should eat. This is how I eat, and if you're interested, buy my book or don't. And I feel like that's kind of what we wanted to do with growing up. Like, I don't know how you should grow up. I can explain to you physiologically what's happening. I can explain to you psychologically, and I know enough about kind of sociology and a little bit about anthropology to kind of talk about how other cultures experience, you know, all of these aspects of growing up. But we didn't want it to be like, I'm a late bloomer and my life is perfect, and you know, because it's not. And but I do think it's important to drive this, you know, kind of point home that you don't need to live with someone to know what it's like to live with someone. You don't need to kiss lots of people to know how to kiss. I mean, obviously there's like a learning curve, but it can be pretty steep, you know. No, but I think like that's something that I used to hear a lot, you know, like, well, you need to be physically intimate with someone so that you know how to be physically intimate. And the fact is, sure, there are advantages and disadvantages to both ways, but we didn't want to present a book where I was sounding like a scolding mom. Like, you know, if you have a scolding mom, you don't need another.
And what advice would you give your 12-year-old Mayim? From this book or otherwise? Well,
I think the advice that I would give 12-year-old me, or really any of the ages that this book is sort of aimed at, you know, for those of us who are different, I talk a lot about being different in the book. I think that it would have been nice to know that I'm probably always going to be different, and that's going to become less and less painful. And I think that I had this notion when I was younger and I felt different and I was different and everyone said that I was different and I knew it. I think I had this notion of like, oh, well, one day I'll be like them and I won't feel so different and I'll blend in and, you know, all the cute boys will like me and my body will be perfect, like, because that's going to happen one day. But I think I would have liked to know, and I do talk about this in the book, sometimes you're just different, but you meet more people like you meet more like-minded people as you get older, and as people you're interested in having relationships with mature, you know, as boys mature, if you're interested in boys, you know, as they mature, things do get easier, but there's always going to be a sense that we're all very, very unique, and there's not a singular experience, and that will get less painful, and it will be, you know, a cause for less angst, or angst. I think my mom was trying to start a round of applause. Mom.
So that's pretty fascinating for me to hear you describe this very, I mean, these are common feelings that I think probably most people feel at some point, at least that also was my experience. However, I was not the star of a television show that was hugely successful and popular, and so I'm right now thinking about having this huge sort of outward success and still having those.
Yeah, so that didn't help.
Okay.
Because I don't know, like a lot of kids are mean, you know, like that's a thing. And I was in a very academically geared junior high and high school program where really the only thing that mattered was literally your grades. It was not seen as an asset that in any way I was garnering more attention. I know my mother wants to shout out, they were jealous of you. I don't, you know, I mean, I think there definitely was an aspect with a lot of the females, you know, that there was a lot of like that, but like boys didn't like me, girls weren't fond of, like that wasn't good. But I think, you know, this is another point that I love to make. You know, I'm known for being like publicly vulnerable, and let's just have a vulnerable moment. So a lot of times when I'm interviewed, people say like, you know, you're so confident, how can I be as confident as you? Or like, you know, you've done so much, and how can I get my daughter to do that? And like, you know, people don't realize I'm not really comfortable with a lot of what I do, but it is what I do. And I don't mean that I'm uncomfortable, I mean that my sense of like existence in the universe is one of, you know, kind of a discomfort. I'm an anxious person. You know, I've talked very publicly about mental health struggles. You know, I'm a big advocate of therapy. I work on myself literally all the time. And, you know, the notion that my public life is very strong, you know, and like my Instagram followers make, you know, the people that have to, you know, give me a thumbs up for having lots of followers happy, like it makes them happy. But that doesn't mean that I'm not like a human being and that I don't feel insecure. Like I go down the rabbit hole of other people's Instagram accounts who I don't even know and like end up weeping in my bed. Like that's like a thing. Like, I cannot be the only. That's like other people do this, right?
No, I think we all
Yeah, okay.
do that. Most of us, yeah.
Yeah, so like that's like I don't, you know, people assume like, ooh, you're so confident, and I'm actually like I'm opinionated and I'm feisty. But that doesn't always translate, you know, to being like confident. And there are times when I will, you know, absolutely open my mouth and say something. But in general, when it comes to like body image or like comparing myself to other, like I'm, you know, I experience all those things as a human being. I'm not above that. And you know, another thing, the reason I talk so openly about mental health is that no one is immune from that. There's no amount of money that you can make. There's no amount of things you can acquire that make you immune, you know, to the stresses of life and the genetic possibility that many of us will struggle with things. So I think that's an important point, and I appreciate that people, you know, may feel inspired by me or by my videos, but like everything, like, you know, a lot of things are hard for me just because like that's who I am, and you don't always get to see that. But part of why I make these YouTube videos is we're trying to open that up in ways that are productive.
That's, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mom.
My mother has never been, have you ever been to a talk of mine? Like once, maybe? She doesn't usually come to things, so this is very, very special to have her here. Oh, I'm gonna get like 7 texts later. Why did you say that?
She's texting you right now.
Rebecca, you're gonna get texts too.
So, one thing I also want, or another thing I want to talk about is the way that you move in and out of the public eye. You were in it.
I'm like darting in and out like an electric eel.
Iconic, but in these very iconic, I mean, these roles that you're in that are standing the test of time and will be very emblematic of a certain time and place in our society. And you come in, and then you step away, and I'm thinking about when you left and went to college and
Did
got
my ex-boyfriend
PhD.
tell you to ask this question?
No.
I'm like, I'm in, I'm out.
Yeah, but
I get close, I pull away.
that decision, and then...
Sorry. I'm not drunk, also. I drove a very long time today.
And then the decision to step back in, and it seems like for me, I would think that the ego is intoxicating, and for you, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like it's a conscious, I'm doing this, and
Correct.
now I'm not.
I'm allergic to my ego. Yeah, so I was a child, teenage actor, and I left the industry when I was 19 for a total of 12 years. And I got my undergraduate degree and my my doctorate as well, and I had 2 children. That happened too. So I came out of grad school with a PhD and a toddler and a newborn. I had to pay extra for that, you know. They really hike up the tuition. And I returned to acting sort of by accident, and it was not because I missed being famous. It was not because I missed making a stupid amount of money, which, you know, really everyone in our industry does. I mean, that's just, you know, that's like a thing. I mean, don't believe everything you read on the internet, but that is a thing, that we do make a lot of money for playing dress up effectively. But no, the fame was never exciting to me, and that was part of why I left at 19. And it's part of why I'm, you know, hesitant now, and why I don't engage in a lot of the things that other, you know, celebrities do. Or, you know, that's the reason why when I started a website, which I did about 2 years ago, you know, I didn't start a celebrity lifestyle site because my lifestyle is such that when I saw the price tag on this outfit, I texted my stylist and said, just kidding, I don't want that outfit, it's too expensive. But yeah, I started a site for people who collect thoughts and not things, and it's a literary site, and it's an analytical kind of thing. So yeah, the fame part is very scary to me. I don't like that seductiveness. I don't find it particularly seductive, but people really get swallowed up by it. And I feel a lot more, I mean, New York City is a place where I kind of feel like me, but the next place that I feel like me is like a place like San Francisco, because in LA it doesn't feel like this. It really does feel like everything's about, you know, fame and ego. And honestly, coming from a world of academia, that's also a very highly ego-based field, especially as a minority, as a woman. You're in a very predominantly male, you know, set of classes and faculty and all of that, and there's a lot of ego there. And yeah, that's not really, you know, also I'm what we call an unadorned feminist, you know, so I'm not really big on like presentation and those kind of things just don't sit well with me. And I write a lot for my website, and I used to write for a Jewish website, Kveller, you know, about sort of the expectations in particular on women and the red carpet. Like, you know, awards season is very exciting, you know, obviously, and being nominated is like, it's crazy and it's really flattering. You know, but the thing that I dread most is like fittings and dresses and and like having to sit in a chair for 2 hours while they, you know, put all this stuff. I should also say this is my real hair, and I love speaking at places like JCCs and Jewish federations because I don't have to be ashamed of my Jewfro here. It's just in all its glory, just every which I got cowlicks for every day of the week.
Have you developed some coping techniques and mechanisms for when you're going through those high stress?
Scotch, high quality scotch.
Excellent.
No, well, a little bit. No. Honestly, like I have a really solid therapist who helps me, you know, navigate a lot of those particularities surrounding it. You know, I'm a feminist who does like to be partnered. Typically with a male, and I do, you know, I've been divorced for many years, but I was in a long-term relationship and found a lot of comfort having someone who knew me really well with me at events, because that does help. It's not the same taking a girlfriend, nothing against women or girlfriends, but there's just something different, you know. So that's hard, like being single and doing that stuff is kind of crummy buttons. But I have a very supportive group of women around me, my publicist, Heather, and my manager, Tiffany. So it's nice to know I always have that kind of support. I always do try and wear a Jewish star or hide one, you know, somewhere. And that gives me a sense of, you know, honestly, like safety and kind of humility. I usually have a vegan Thai iced tea before a red carpet event. A little sugar and caffeine never hurt to kind of, you know, power you through. And honestly, our cast is very close, and so whenever we have events where we get to be together, that feels good. I'm close with Melissa Rausch and Simon Helberg in particular. Yes, they happen to be the Jewish cast members, but everyone's thinking that. They're like, But no, I'm close. But it's, you know, so it's always nice also. But the last 2 times I was nominated for Emmys, I was the only one nominated, and our show wasn't nominated, so I was like alone, which is, you know, it's different, especially if you have social anxiety, which I do, and that looks like a lot of different things, so that can be not pleasant.
the scotch comes in.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to sit up here and like advocate for drinking alcohol to make yourself feel better socially. However, it has worked for thousands of years. And so I do not have a drinking problem. So yeah, I mean, that's honestly, that is something I speak about. I speak about it in the book. You know, like alcohol is absolutely, you know, a social lubricant and one that should be used, you know, especially with caution. I mean, seriously, especially in those developing years. And I do make everything about science somehow, and I just did.
Speaking of your values,
Yes.
I want to spend some time talking about Judaism and your relationship to it and your values. You get a lot of press for both, and I'm wondering.
I'm like God's best publicist.
You are God's best publicist. So I was trying to think about, okay, who else is kind of the famous and religious, and really the only other person I immediately thought about was Stephen Colbert, who we were talking about.
Correct.
Not Jewish, just in case anyone was confused. He's Catholic. But I'm wondering, are there others? Do you have like a secret club?
So no, it's funny you mentioned that. So there is a little bit of a secret club. I mean, it's not so secret because I'm going to tell you all about it now. So David Sachs is someone who was a Simpsons writer, executive producer, won an Emmy for that. He became religious kind of after that, but he's very observant. And I won't name him by name, but one of our executive producers on our show, we actually learned with David. We did like chavrusa, like a, you know, like proper Jewish learning. I think for 2 years we did that. And honestly, this person, well, his name's Eric, our producer Eric. He's a really comforting, you know, presence because we often will meet and hang out and like talk religion and things like that. And we're on a very similar kind of spiritual derech, as it were, path. You know, there are not really actors who are observant. I mean, I know somebody's gonna be like, there was a guy on CSI. Like, that's true. There was like one guy that I heard of, but I don't. In terms of like, in terms of the like circles that I know, there are other writers who are from Observant, but yeah, there's not that many of us, and sometimes I do kind of connect more with like religious Christians. You know, in that sense, in the sense of like being, you know, kind of lone wolves as religious people. But I don't think it's just the industry. Like, I think in general, you know, a lot of traditional patriarchal religion has fallen, I don't want to say out of favor, but there are a lot of things I'm unhappy about the patriarchy and how it's presented in Judeo-Christianity. So, you know, it's not like I'm, you know, I don't wave the flag of orthodoxy like this is the best way to be Jewish. And, you know, there are a lot of different ways. And, you know, I think ultimately you know, I think I'm in the right audience to say I'm a spiritual person. Like in LA, that means like I like yoga. But I think, I think the Northern California understanding of spirituality is about, you know, a connection with something that gives your life meaning and purpose that may not be perfectly structured, you know, around a patriarchal, you know, religion like that. And I do have, you know, a lot of that too. I'm a very like, you know, I'm like a crunchy granola hippy dippy person. Don't let my $600 outfit fool you. Right? You wouldn't spend that either. I was like, no. Are we having fun, Jordan?
We are having so much fun. Are you guys having fun? Great. So when as you're moving through life as a religious, spiritual, not yoga, but spiritual person, and wondering how do you make the decisions about being observant and flexible? I mean, how do you kind of hold up each piece of prescribed religious tradition and assess it as to whether it applies to you or not, or?
That's a really big question. Do you mean in terms of my lifestyle or just in general? Like, how do I decide that I don't wear pants outside the house, but like whatever, like things like that?
I think, that or bigger.
Yeah, I mean, I formally learned, I did a minor in Hebrew and Jewish studies in college, and that was sort of the beginning of, you know, starting to study more of like the formal structure of Judaism in terms of Jewish history and sociology. And then after I had my first son, I actually signed up for Partners in Torah, which is a free program where you're matched with a partner, usually across the country. They're usually in New York. And it's free, and you can study anything you want. And I wanted to study Well, what I did was when I was matched with this woman, her name's Allison Josephs, and she actually goes by Jew in the City online. She has an online presence, and anyway, we were matched together, and I basically said to her, these are all of the negative things that I think about Judaism. I don't want you to disprove them. I want you to explain where those stereotypes come from, and kind of start explaining around them so I can understand more about traditional Judaism. And so we studied a lot about women's issues. I actually studied with a Kala teacher, with a bride instructor, a very progressive one before I got married. So yeah, I started formally learning, and that opened up a lot for me and also helped me understand the structure of halacha, the places where there are loopholes in Jewish law, and why they're there. And it gave me a greater appreciation for, like Judaism in an historical context, which for me was really important for deciding what I, wanted to observe or not. But for me, like, God is separate from that. The physics is separate from that. My God is the God of the tides and physics and the reason we don't fly off the planet, and why, if I turn this over, the water's going to spill on the floor. Like, I have absolute certainty that if I turn that glass upside down, the water's going to fall on the floor. And so if you have that certainty and you don't believe in God, that's fine, but I believe we believe in the same thing. We believe that there are forces in the universe that, yeah, we can explain them, but we don't know their origins, and they're completely infinite. They're arbitrary in terms of what we call them. Like the number 8 is only the number 8 because we call it the number 8, but the concept of 8 exists without name and without, that's math just is. So for me, like, that's where my religious faith is, and that's very, I find a tremendous source of comfort in ritual. And if you don't like ritual, yeah, halachic Judaism is not for you, because there's a lot of ritual. And honestly, if you do, and I'm not speaking lightly about this, if you have a personality that tends to obsessions and compulsions, there are a lot of things, honestly, in traditional Judaism that give you places to bind anxiety that way. And there's actually some really interesting research about hormones and Orthodox women and OCD diagnoses, and it's very, very interesting research. A lot of it's out of UCLA. But anyway, those things they bring me comfort and they give me routine. I love the Jewish calendar. I love that it's tied to the seasons, even in this modern time. And I'm ethnically Eastern European, and I'm a mutt. I'm a conglomeration of Poland and of Hungary and of, like, either Ukraine or Russia or Poland, depending on who didn't want to claim the Jews at that time of the war. And so there are foods that I eat, and there's a language of Yiddish that was my mama lesson, like, that's my culture, that's who I am. Being Jewish for me is not a religion. It's like my eyes are, blue with, like gold flecks in the middle, and I'm Jewish. Like, that's just who I am. And my Judaism has, really become a lot more, progressive and expansive, just like our understanding of gender has become a lot more progressive and expansive. And I do talk about that in the book as well, both in the religion and the gender, ways. So I think there's been like a general broadening of my understanding, but I feel very, very comforted by a notion of, like, I wake up every morning and, like, that's amazing. That's a miracle to me. And, I think we have the same faith if we believe we'll wake up tomorrow, and the way we celebrate it may be differently. But, I think that, like, a lot of times atheists are more religiously fanatical about not believing in religion than I am about being religious. Like, usually the only people who say, like, how do you reconcile science and religion are non-religious people, Like, well, I'm okay with it. Like, everybody's fine. Like, there's evolution and there's God. Like, everybody's fine with it on this side. I'm not atheist shaming. Like, I might be accused of that.
You mentioned when you started studying, that you had this list of negative associations, which I'm curious about. We don't have to get into, but you mentioned gender and well, specifically that you have a strong feminist identity, and gender roles being one of the, I think you mentioned, negative associations. And I'm curious if you have advice for other people who are also trying to navigate the space between a strong religious conviction, which tends to put them in a place of more conservatism in life and community, alongside the strong feminist identity and belief system and values.
Well, I'm glad you saved this easy question for now. I don't know that I have advice. I know what I've done, and it, for the most part, it's worked for me. I get angry a lot. I still get angry a lot. And there are organizations like the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance, JOFA, which I'm sure that there are many of you rolling your eyes like Orthodox feminism. But it actually is a thing, and there are women who advocate actively within the structure of Orthodoxy because it has value for them to fight for the rights of women and to fight for agunot, women who are chained in marriages because their husbands will not grant them a get. The notions of gender equality or gender distinction in the prayer space, is a very hot topic. Yeshivat Maharat, which is Rabbi Sarah Hurwitz, is an organization or a seminary that I support with my voice and with my pocketbook. Like, I'm a donor for that organization. We have several, we call them different things at different synagogues, but Los Angeles was had the first Orthodox synagogue to hire a female clergy person. Yeah, it's really amazing. It's B'nai David, and she's unbelievable. And, a lot of my frustration fuels a lot of my passion. And when I was, getting divorced and being granted my get and going through the process of speaking to rabbis,
what does it get for those who may not know?
In a traditional Jewish marriage, you have a civil, a legal marriage document, and then there's also a ketubah, which is a written document, actually one of the first written documents historically to aim to protect women. A get guarantees that your husband, who many times when ketubahs were being written, oftentimes men would go away and study and travel, and the ketubah was supposed to protect a woman in case he didn't come back, she's still there, that 12-year-old, in case when he came back, he did not fulfill his husbandly duties. That was actually a reason that you could ask for a get. And a get is a written, it's emotional because I got one, and it's a very interesting process, a very interesting ritual. A get is a written document that's written by a scribe in front of a beis din, in front of a court of three, that releases you from your marriage. And it's a very powerful ceremony. I actually wrote an article about what that was like for me and Mike to do that. Anyway, so a lot of these issues are being tackled in particular by some of these female clergy members. And, again, I know a lot of women, especially of an older generation, think like, well, that's not really a rabbi. But the fact is, what a lot of these Orthodox clergy women are doing is they are participating in activities that are not halachically restricted. There are customs in every community that are different, but the female rabbis within Orthodoxy are not signing documents, which is something we have not, kind of figured out yet. And a lot of people say, well, why don't you just be a conservative female rabbi or reform? Because for a lot of women, and I'm one of them, there's a lot of beauty to the halachic structure and to observant Judaism. So again, I feel like we always have to function inside the patriarchy. We all are, men and women. And, I do believe that there is strength in a lot of the traditional values of Judaism. As a person who happens to be very domestic and enjoys that, I like the rhythms of the Jewish calendar and sort of my prescribed role in a lot of ways. And I don't feel like that makes me a hypocrite or a contradiction. People love to point out, like, well, if she's a feminist, why is she shaving her leg? Well, I don't shave my legs, but they say that about other people, right? And the fact is, like, because you don't get to make the rules about how any particular woman gets to exist. That's why, like, a lot of times I can be very, I can seem like a contradiction, but that's just me in all of my entirety, and that's all of us, men and women too, Oh. Yeah. Just got quiet.
You mentioned some egalitarianism in prayer, and I know your involvement with Women of the Wall.
Oh, right. I mean, I don't know that I have a particular involvement. I have spoken, about some of the activism that they have done. Do you want me to talk more about that?
Yeah, we can talk.
Oh, no, I mean, it's... So I actually, I don't... I'm just another person, I think like with certain things, people are like, well, what does Mayim Bialik say about Women of the Wall?
And just to just clarify that everyone understands what Women of the Wall is, do you want to give a brief...
Are you telling me that, or
I'm asking that? Will you give a brief explanation?
I mean, correct me or fill in if I'm wrong. Women of the Wall is an organization that was originally started by a group of Orthodox Jewish women who wanted equal kind of prayer space and prayer rights at the Kotel in Jerusalem. And some of the complexity of this is that while many of us do support, the right of women to have that, there are many ways to go about trying to take down the patriarchy, and some of the ways that Women of the Wall in particular and other organizations have tried to enforce that has been very, very bold, which is good. But sometimes, sometimes it's met with a lot of aggressive resistance, which I think fuels more publicity and less conversation. So I've actually been, I don't want to say critical, but I'm very, I'm hesitant to try and shove things down the patriarchy's throat because often spoon feeding it, and giving it a little bit more time and space, I think may be helpful. For me in particular, and I wrote about this extensively, my father, Zichrono Livracha, passed away 2 years ago, and I recited Kaddish for him for a year, and I said Kaddish in many, many places, wherever I went. I travel a lot, for my work and in my life, and I would find a minyan, pretty much. I mean, I found places to say Kaddish, not only in Israel, but in Florida, in Savannah, Georgia, up and down this state, all around New York. And, I was saying Kaddish mostly in communities that had never had a woman say Kaddish before. And I will say I was never turned down, and I said Kaddish at some pretty strict Orthodox places. My local Orthodox synagogue, which is a right-wing modern Orthodox shul, carved out a space for me, and the community was really touched by my presence there. It was very complicated, but the role of women and women's prayer space became very clear because there was no space for me, and statistically speaking, women typically don't want to come to a morning minyan at 5:30 in the morning because they're smart and they either stay in bed or take care of children or, I don't know, sleep, But I was that woman, who had to be, not who had to be, but who dragged myself out of bed. And there were places that I said Kaddish which were horrendous in terms of, how women were treated. I've said Kaddish literally behind a wall. I've said Kaddish places where when I bowed, like to say the Shemona Esrei, I would hit my head on, a wall in front of me. It brought it home for me because I never wanted to not say Kaddish for my father. Never. And as angry as I would get and as painful as it was for me, I have to remember that I get to decide what my experience is, and I don't let to get those men. I don't allow those men to determine what my experience is with my God and the memory of my father. And I choose to function within a structure of Judaism that provided me a tremendous sense of comfort through the rituals that it encourages and that I chose to participate in. My rabbi, Chaim Seidler Feller from UCLA, Hillel, he taught all of us that you have to live with tension. If you want a religion that has answers, there are many on the street corner that you can go to. We're a religion of questions, and there's a lot of tension in a religion that really supplies questions.
Thank you. We were talking about Jerusalem and the Wailing Wall, and another woman who is a self-identified feminist and Orthodox Jew, Ivanka Trump. And I
was like, no, she didn't. Oh, no, she didn't. Yes.
And I'm wondering what you might tell her. Do you have advice? I mean, do you think she would be open to listening to you? Presumably she grew up.
Is she here? Did you bring her?
No.
About what in particular?
Well, you've got a platform, and she's got a platform.
She's got platform shoes a lot of the time.
As do you. What are your, three, if you were able to sit down with Ivanka and offer her some, can you get these issues in front of the world?
It's funny because Jordan and I spoke briefly about what we were going to talk about, and I mentioned we'll talk about Ivanka Trump, and she was like, haha, that'd be fun. And here now she came out with a hardcore
hung out
question.
To dry.
I honestly, I don't envy. I I don't envy her position, meaning that's an incredibly difficult place to be in, even as she was growing up. Like, the whole thing is like so, like you know, there's like such a bonkers aspect to what her life was like. No, just like growing up the way she did, and you know, being in the public eye like that. And I don't know her, and I don't know that I mean, of course there are things that I, you know, clearly believe that I would hope would be important to her. But honestly, I don't really know what role she's actually taking, and I get very sensitive and prickly around the discussion of the Kushners, as it were, because a lot of the Jewish conversation about it makes me really uncomfortable. You know, and I know that like in LA we're kind of in a bubble, in San Francisco we're kind of in a bubble, but I do know that there are many Jewish people, you know, who really believe in voting for the Republican Party, sometimes for financial reasons and sometimes for Israel reasons, and you know, I get that. But it really makes me nervous when, you know, like, oh, Jews will be okay because Kushner's in there. Like, that makes me feel really icky, because I don't know that they always, you know, that couple needs to speak for me or my Judaism, especially because of, you know, their alignment with a party that I don't feel is consistent with my Jewish values. So, thank you. So, you know, I'm gonna, you know, call on the amendment that allows me not to have to answer that specifically. But I will say that I think that my hope is that there will be a space, you know, if she is, you know, an intelligent person who wants her intelligence kind of put out there, my hope had been that there would be a place for that, and wouldn't that be interesting? But it's been such chaos that there hasn't even been room for that. And it's interesting because Billy Bush just came out with a very interesting interview. So he was the one in that, you know, bus situation. And I was just on Access Hollywood yesterday for the book, and that's the show that he used to be on. And so it just had me thinking about it, and I read this article, and if you haven't seen this article or the interview with him, it's very interesting because, and you know, you can roll your eyes and say, bless you, and say like it's just lip service, but he in this interview, he talked about what it was like to get a phone call from his daughter, and that she called him right after the news broke. I don't know if she was 16, 17, and he thought that she was calling to be like, Dad, are you okay? So he said, you know, she got on the phone and she's like, Dad, what's going on? And he's like, everything's okay, honey. And she said, no. Why did you laugh when he said that? I know. And he gave a really beautiful interview about what it's been like to come to a place of reckoning, about what he was like and the things that went on in his mind and in our culture that led to that situation. And you know, I still feel like I have this like pipe dream that things can like somehow, you know, straighten out so that we can have a place for, you know, Ivanka to stand up and be like, I fixed him, you know? I don't think that's gonna happen, but I do think it's very interesting and significant that we have, you know, a modern Orthodox couple in that kind of position, because if nothing else, you know, it brings up a lot of questions. And I remember I once saw a picture of her and Jared when they had a baby. She was walking with a pram, like in Manhattan, and I mean, I think her outfits are typically like super awesome. Like when she's going to shul, there's always like a weird hat with like a feather and a veil, and you know, it's like very, very fancy. And they had a lulav, you know, over the top of the agala, the pram, stroller. Sorry, I'm like gonna use every other dialect for stroller. And the headline was like, Jared buys Ivanka flowers on their stroll in New York. And it was like, I really wished I could have like taken a megaphone and been like, it's a lulav. It's a lulav.
And a lulav is
a lulav for the holiday. Wow, sorry.
Does everyone know what a lulav is?
It's for the holiday of Sukkot. It's like literally one of the weirdest things Jews do ritually. We take like myrtle and willow leaves and palm, and it sounds crazy, and we tie them together and we wave them all around.
It's a ritual.
Wait, I'm not done. And then we take a citron fruit
Which smells delicious.
And I call it an esrig, but in Hebrew they call it an etrog. We call it an esrig in Yiddish. So you take the citron. If no one's ever heard of this, you're going to be like, Jews are crazy. And you hold them together and you shake them pretty violently in all the directions. It's like one of the most pagan-y, non-pagan things we do.
And we celebrate Sukkot here at the JCC.
Do we?
You are all invited to come back in October.
And you can shake your lulav and your
12.
etrog.
I have a few rapid-fire questions I want to go through, and then we'll turn to audience questions.
Everyone's thinking she doesn't know how to do rapid fire. She's so talkative.
Your bat mitzvah theme?
My bat mitzvah theme was water because my name means.
All right. Favorite Jewish holiday?
Pesach. Passover.
Floaters or sinkers? Matzo balls. No? Passover's your favorite holiday.
Those terms didn't automatically make me think of matzo balls. So awkward right now. I don't know, Ma, did yours float? I think floating matzo balls is the way to go.
Her answer was her mom's matzo balls, which we can all agree is the
I'm vegan. It's very difficult to make a vegan matzo ball, but I've done it the last 2 years, and they definitely sink.
How many instruments do you play?
I play, let me just say them out loud, because I don't know. Piano, trumpet, I play bass guitar. I did learn to play harp for Big Bang Theory. Also auto harp, which is not really a separate instrument, but I do know how to play it. And I just started learning clarinet because my 8-year-old wants to, so we're learning together.
That's great.
He wants a klezmer band in our house.
That's
true.
And we would love to hire that klezmer band to play at Sukkot.
My older son is a violinist, and that would be lovely.
Great. Family band back here in October.
That's right.
All right, apropos of today, what are your recommendations for a road trip playlist? Or did you listen to? What did you do on your road trip?
My mom's car, this literally was almost like the deal breaker of this trip. Her car does not have like Bluetooth, you can't plug an iPhone, like nothing. And like I literally, when I got to her house this morning as we were preparing to come and see all of you lovely people, I literally like I laid my head on the front seat of the car like, oh my God, what am I gonna do without music? So I texted Assistant Caroline, who was on her way over, and I was like, please tell me you can loan me headphones so that I can have some quiet time. Not because I don't want to talk to people. I mean, like, it's good to have some quiet time. But I'm a very musically driven person, and my father and I did 5 father-daughter road trips, which were really, like, geared around the music we listened to. So today, in the car, I was mostly rocking out to, let's see, the Justin Timberlake really got me going. That was a mix. I make mixes like it's still the 80s, and so that was a mix that I had made of all really positive love songs. And I was listening to Mirrors, like You're My Mirror. But also, I like Mumford & Sons, and that's very good also to drive to. Adele 25 is an album that's just always good. So that's when I was crying while driving, right? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. But I also like Motown for any purpose.
Right. Dog or cat?
Cat. Many cats.
If you were to write fan fiction about Big Bang Theory, what would happen?
I don't really know what fan fiction is. Is that like where people make up stories and then they publish them on the internet? I don't know. I don't know. Something with Raj. I think he's a really funny character. I like the Raj and Stewart stuff. I'd probably have them get married.
Excellent. Terrific fan. I'm sure it
Everyone's
exists.
kind of waiting for it, so yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a best line you've uttered in your career for work that springs to mind? Craziest, funniest, hardest to deliver?
Oh.
The answer's no.
Yeah, not really.
I mean, no. Yeah.
Not so much. Oh, yeah, no.
Okay.
I don't have such a good memory for that stuff also.
Right. Well, I want to leave lots of time for audience questions,
Okay.
so I'm thinking we should move towards that.
Okay.
Becky and Dee have microphones on either side of the audience. Please raise your hand, wait for the microphone to come to you. Remember, this is a question, not a comment section of the evening.
I have your first question here.
Oh, hey.
Hi,
Hi.
Can you talk a little bit about your tattoo and what led you to getting it and why you got the Great Wave? Because I think that's my favorite random fun fact about you.
Yeah, so I am a tattooed Jew. I did get my tattoos in theory before I was more observant. I will say that, but there are Jews of all different types. The notion that you can't, I figured I'll clear this up first, because like people aren't going to be listening to what I say, because they're going to be like, she can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery. Nah, nah, nah. So there actually was a really funny Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where they find out when his mother dies that she had a tattoo on her butt, and there was a really funny thing about that. So the prohibition against tattooing biblically is typically against tribal scarring. There were many tribes, other tribes, that would scar in mourning, and so it was one of those distinctions, like we don't do that. So for many Jews, because it's not necessarily done as a tribal scarring that way, many people feel there's a distinction. And the prohibition against not being buried in an Orthodox portion of a Jewish cemetery actually holds if you don't observe the Sabbath as well. So a tattoo is a more visible and external piece of evidence of a violation of a commandment, but technically, if you don't observe the Sabbath, you also would legally be prohibited, and that would make a lot of us not able to be buried in the cemeteries we want to. And I'll just bring it up, because why not? It's a Jewish audience. I don't feel conflict regarding the tattooing in terms of the Holocaust. I know a lot of people do. I don't. People are allowed, obviously, to feel that. I don't feel that has to be a universal sensitivity. For me, it wasn't, something that I felt was disrespectful. So, that being said, I actually have 2 tattoos, and both are Japanese themed. My father was a Japanophile, and I grew up with a lot of Japanese culture and Japanese art. And one of the kind of ever-present images in my childhood and throughout my life was the Hokusai wave, which is a Japanese woodblock print, very famous. And it's that big blue and white cresting wave, and my name means water, and I took a very long time to decide to get this tattoo, and I actually, a friend of mine is a tattoo artist, and he designed it for me and made a temporary, basically like a rub-on that I wore for quite some time to see if I really wanted it. Most people don't know that I have a tattoo because I chose to get it in a place that I didn't need to show it if I didn't want to. So it is all the way around my body, though. I have a very large piece that took 2 separate sittings. And on the back of my neck, which again only shows if I want it to, if I wear my hair up, I have a Japanese cherry blossom, which is a symbol of fleeting beauty and suffering. It's a very popular image in Zen Buddhism, and I don't think about them a lot now. I don't really regret them. I'm grateful that they're in places that they don't show unless I want them to. I don't advocate people getting tattoos, and I don't say that people shouldn't. I'm, literally just another person, but that's the tattoo story.
Question down here in the center.
Hi.
Hi.
As another 41-year-old with anxiety problems and a PhD in engineering who doesn't use it, do you ever feel, and a Jew, so this is where the next part of it comes. Do you ever feel guilty for not using your degree to the fullest? Because I am working as a program manager now, and I am not working on DNA anymore, and you're very successful, and hoping maybe you can help my guilty conscience, I guess.
Well, I can help your guilty conscience by telling you that I don't know if guilty is the right word, but I feel that too. And I think especially as women, when we achieve things that historically women have not achieved, there's this notion of why would you waste it by, and then fill in the blank. And I, specifically was told, why would you waste it by staying home with your children and not getting a postdoc? That's a thing that people said to me. I think there's 2 ways also to answer this. I don't feel like my degree is wasted, because for me, like, that journey made me who I am. And the ability to make the decision to be, which for me was the right decision, it may not be the right decision for everyone, the decision for me to stay home with my children was only made because of all those years that I was in school, and that I learned to appreciate my life and the universe and my place in it. And it's kind of like, you know, we're all the things we do, and we're also all the things that we don't do. So, you know, for me, like, I wouldn't give up my training for anything. You know, literally formatting a thesis and doing a thesis before you could use the internet, was one of the most challenging things I've ever done. And like, I've given birth to 2 children with no drugs. Like, I've done some hard things. Yeah, and like, I just want to talk about that a little more. I wrote a thesis, and many of us did, when you could not use the internet. So I wouldn't give up those years and those struggles, because it helped me make the decisions that I did. But I think also it should not be brushed aside that this is something that, in particular for women, tends to be something that we do consider and think about in different ways. And yes, men make decisions about starting families and all those things, but if you are a woman, and I know not every woman wants to have babies, and that's fine. If you are a woman who wants to have a baby and you'd like it to grow inside of your body and then come out of your body, you have a different set of considerations. And for me, those weighed very heavily. And you know, I'm a scientist, and I'm a mammal, and I, you know, fed and kept my children alive the way mammals have for all of mammalian history. And that connected me to my children physically in a way that really got in the way, it's true, of my career. And again, it's like living with that tension, you know? Yeah, sometimes I would look at like the 80th diaper in a day and say, like, why is this what I'm doing? Like, I have a PhD. But, you know, I also, like, basically got the most advanced degree you can get is being a parent, and you get no training and no salary, and it's like the hardest, best job you'll ever have, you know? It's not for everyone, but it was for me. And yeah, and you know, people love asking Mayim Bialik this question. When Big Bang's over, are you gonna go back to being a PhD neuroscientist? It's like, no, my degree is worth, like, not much once you leave like that. And you know, I look at my boys, and I know that, like, for me, that's what it was. Like, for me, that was that decision. I was home with my children instead of teaching other people's children. And for me, it was the right decision. But yeah, I'm resentful sometimes, for sure. My life could have been really different. I wouldn't have to wear makeup all the time, you know?
Up here on your right.
Looks like on your
Right there, okay.
Hi.
Hey.
My question is, what is the funniest thing that ever happened on The Big Bang Theory?
You mean like on the set? Yeah. There's a lot of there's a lot of things we think are funny. I don't know if you'll think are funny. Jim Parsons once said something really funny. It's actually related to children things. So I was on a medication before I got pregnant with my first son, and I was 35 pounds over my normal weight when I got pregnant. And then I gained a healthy amount of weight. And I'm not a tall woman. But let's just put it this way. My 6-foot-tall then husband weighed less than I did. And I'm 5'4". And there are photographs. There are photographs of this time in my life. And I was one day talking to Jim Parsons, because we were just talking, like, you know, we talk a lot. And I was explaining what the dimensions of myself were. And that at some point I used a midwife for our care, and I stopped weighing myself at the midwife's office. Like, literally, it was like, it doesn't even matter anymore. It's so above and beyond any statistics. Like, anyway. And Jim said, I don't believe you. And I was like, no, like, my teeth were pregnant. Like, I said, like, you wouldn't, and he's like, I don't believe you. And I went home, and I gathered pictures, including one in a tankini. And I brought the pictures to work the next day, and he looked at them, and he was very quiet, and he shuffled through them, and he said, why would you show anyone these pictures? and Jim is very funny, and he's Southern. He's got a very sharp wit. He's very composed in a very, like, proper Southern way, but he's also got a very wicked sense of humor. Anyway, that's one of my favorite stories.
Question over here on the left.
Hi, thanks for being here. I wanted to ask you a question, follow up on the doctoral degree. As someone else that holds a doctoral degree, and, as a woman, do you find that you are still not receiving the same level of respect that a man might receive as a
Yes.
as a PhD? And in
That's a
fact,
quick
you weren't
answer.
introduced as doctor this evening, and I'm just wondering, how you feel about that.
Yeah. Did she say I wasn't? I wasn't listening.
I didn't introduce you as
Jordan,
doctor.
why didn't you introduce? Let's
You know,
let's turn
I will.
the
So
tables.
I will
No,
say,
I'm kidding.
I will say that I introduce a lot of people, and I don't introduce anyone as doctor whatever unless they have an MD or they specifically request it. So,
I should. Okay, Ma, I'll tell you later. Oh my God. Okay,
but
so
we
no,
can
but
have a
this is
conversation about whether I should start. I've people with PhDs who tell me
Well,
they feel
right.
uncomfortable when I call
so
them
this,
doctor.
No, and I think it's a good point. I think that there's a lot of variability, and I do think that not tonight, but I do think some of it is gender biased, and I think that I earned that PhD, and it took me 7 years and 2 children and like all of my sanity, and so I'm proud of it, and I'm often asked, like, how do you want your blurb to read on the back of a book, right? Because I'm often asked to give blurbs for the book. And what I say is, if you're using MD's designations, please use my doctoral designation. I will always ask, like, well, what are other people doing, right? And we like having it on things like books because it gives a little bit of credibility. But what I've noticed is that when negative things are written about me, they often will either purposely omit that I have a doctorate or purposely point it out. Like when untrue things are said about me in vaccines, which there are many untrue things said, it's like, she's a doctor, we should revoke her PhD. So people also use it against you, and I do think that kind of cattiness sometimes is reserved for women. I saw and heard a lot of really, really awful things as a woman in science about other women in my department. I talk a lot about, how, kind of women can't win. If you're attractive, then that's all you hear, the other students talking about is the attractiveness of your professor and, other horrible things that, that honestly heterosexual men sometimes speak about women in a certain way, and professors were not immune from that. And then professors who were unadorned, as it were picked on and called dykes, which that was when that wasn't like a word that you used in any way like that. So I really feel like as a woman, you kind of, can't win that way. But I also think that, I get to consistently put out, the message that I put out as a person with a platform. It's not a MD. Like if I'm on a plane and someone's like, is there a doctor on the plane? I don't put my hand up. Like I can tell you about OCD or oxytocin or breastfeeding, but that's rarely needed on an airplane.
we have time for 2 more questions.
2 more questions.
And up here on your right.
Good evening. I really just want you to stand up and show us your $600 outfit.
I think that doesn't count as a question.
No, we can still do 2 more questions.
Question over here on the
She
left.
didn't even say, can I see your $600?
It's true.
Question over here on the left.
It's kind of a 2-part question. The first half being that there was an episode where you were in sweatpants.
Yes, that's true. Good call.
So
You want me to
that's
answer
the
that?
first part. And the
Okay.
second part is that sometimes I find myself defending Judaism when people will say, well, the women are forced to dress in a certain way or whatever. And actually, not just Judaism, but Islam as well. And I'm curious what you have to say about that, and how do you kind of defend that, right to dress as you dress?
Right. So, okay. So just to clarify, so I don't wear I don't wear pants outside of the house. It's been many, many years. I do wear pants inside of the house, and very recently, I've experimented with wearing some of those big pants. Do you know what I'm talking about? The ones with the low-hanging crotch. My mother's applauding. I don't think they work for me.
That child is younger than 12.
Yeah. I apologize to the
Palazzo,
parents. for
like a
that joke.
palazzo pant.
Kind of like a palazzo pant, and then I have Israeli army pants that were my cousins, and I've started experimenting with wearing them like just if I'm like literally like going to like the accountant's office and then coming home. But I have found that even in trying to like explore wearing pants again outside the house, I just don't feel comfortable. I don't like it. It's not for me. So I wear skirts, and my stylist thought that when I tried this skirt on, it was too big, so she got me a smaller size, which I didn't know till I put it on. I typically wear things to the knee. I don't wear sleeveless. I don't wear low plunging necklines. I don't do any unnatural cleavage, meaning I don't use like tape and contraptions, which most women on the red carpet do use. Like if there's cleavage, or whatever, just because I'm ample bosomed, then that's just what it is, but I don't do any kind of additional stuff. So, in terms of some of these restrictions, the sweatsuit episode is very interesting because I had to I had to advocate strongly to not wear pants on the show. And in that particular episode, it was very early on, and I remember I didn't have such a great, confident relationship yet with the producers, and on our show and on Chuck Lorre shows in general, there's often very, very specific restrictions and things that they want. And there was a line in the script that Amy was in a jogging suit or something, and there was not a way for me to propose wearing a skirt when the punchline of a joke was a sweatsuit. So I did wear a long shirt over it that technically covered, my tush. But yeah, it didn't feel comfortable. It was a very brief scene. I've also been in a Star Trek dress that was shorter than I tend to wear. I got to wear tights under, which was good. Bless you. And then, anyway, so that was the sweatband thing. And then the other thing in terms of dress, we actually, Caroline and my mom and I talked about this a bit in the car today, just because we had a lot of time. And, I think that it's a very long answer, and I'll make it short, because we do have time for just one more question after that. There are communities where women do not really have much of a choice in a lot of things that they do. Whether it's dress or a choice of career. You hear these stories of like the Hasidic girl who like really wanted to be a dancer and breaks out and like has an amazing life and leaves that world and they excommunicate her and it's very dramatic. And the fact is I think that more opportunities need to be presented for women, especially in religious communities, absolutely. However, for all of history, women and men's bodies have been different. Women have historically been more prey to assault, and men have conquered lands and women for all of human history. It's a horrible reality of what the kind of structure of being human is like. So women have always been protected differently. Many Orthodox men do have rules about modesty as well. Modesty is not just about what you wear, it's also about how you behave. And I actually just interviewed a very interesting woman. I cannot remember her last name. Mona, I think Huma, and she's a Muslim rapper, like singing rapper, like I'm sure she raps gifts as well, but that's not what I meant. Rapping My Hijab is like this song of hers that went viral, and when I asked her the same question, I said a lot of Muslim feminists say that wearing a hijab, which is the head covering that lets your face show, and you can wear pants and whatever, I said a lot of feminists would say that that's oppressive. And she said, you know what? We're all living in the patriarchy. Like, whether you're part of a religion, not, like, we're all functioning the best way we can. And she said, for me, this is a spiritual practice that brings me closer to God. And she said, yes, we're all in the construct of other people's expectations, usually men's. But I think that it's very easy to dismiss orthodoxy or Orthodox women as oppressed. And the fact is, for a lot of women in those communities who say, like, well, I'm making a choice, but when it's the only choice, it's kind of a little bit complicated. So I think that's something we also need to honor and respect. But for me, I feel very, very protected and happy. And for me, it's a feminist statement to decide how much of me you get to see, that I get to decide, not what's in magazines,
Thank you.
Last question.
Right here.
Last question.
Last question.
Make it a good one.
Okay.
Or don't.
Or don't.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Do you see a separation between being a religious Jew and a cultural Jew? Because some people who you might define as being agnostic or not believing in religion at all, wanting to follow it, feel culturally Jewish and with no connection to the religion itself.
Yeah.
So do you see that as a realistic, an ability to mesh those two, being atheist, or I mean, I don't really like definitions, people to
Sure.
label themselves, but someone you might define as an atheist or an agnostic.
Sure, no, I
and
can
yet
definitely speak to that.
Who feels that they were brought up with Jewish values and feel culturally Jewish.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
actually really, thank you. I think this is a great question, to end on. Yes, that's absolutely, that's a distinction that not only do I personally believe in, but I think it's a very important one, and it highlights the complexity of Jewish identity, really. Bless you. I remember, so my ex-husband is a convert, and he allows me to tell people that. A lot of converts, sometimes don't want to be identified as that. But I remember, one of the first meetings we had with our rabbi, who ended up, doing his conversion and marrying us, and and Mike, said, like, well, I don't really know about this God thing. And the rabbi said, oh, you think that's going to stop anyone from wanting to convert you? Like, welcome to the club. There are many Jews, who struggle with the notion of God, the structure of religious practice, halacha. And the amazing thing about being Jewish is that your Jewish identity absolutely exists independent of your ritual practice, of your religious belief. And, whenever people kind of disparagingly say, like, oh, you're just a religion like all others, why do you get a country? Which unfortunately, people do still feel. Being Jewish, and, I get a lot of harassment for this, but again, once people are like, well, she kind of studied it and she has a PhD, which I don't even know if that makes me a better authority on this, but, what I've learned as a scientist, when you have a group of people who experience the genetic bottleneck that leads to diseases being prominent, that leads to the notion of a universal cultural identity, that's not, quote, just a religion, that's an ethnic identity. And your belief system and the structure of how you practice, thank you, someone felt passionately about that. Your belief structure, how you practice, what you believe in, that's completely separate from your ethnic identity as a Jew. And, when we think about the Marranos, people who were forcibly converted, from Judaism, due to the Inquisition, what a show. Okay, sorry, some people old enough to know Mel Brooks. Those people are ethnically Jewish. They're part of the Jewish population, and I don't mean to argue for like a progressive Judaism of like, anyone who is part of the ethnic line, but it kind of is. And, when we have a population, like the genetic thing is a real thing. You don't find that in Christian communities, that you have Tay-Sachs and Gaucher's and multiple sclerosis, grouping with Crohn's disease and colitis, and all of the genetic things are really proof that we're a distinct ethnic and genetic population. And for that reason, I think it's really amazing, to experience Jewish culture in places like New York, where a lot of non-Jews seem Jewish, right? But yeah, I think, a lot of people in my family are absolutely culturally Jewish, have no really relationship to God or ritual, but have this sense of like a Yiddish neshama, which sometimes is food related, sometimes it's music related, sometimes it's comedy related. And that's, Woody Allen is a great example. And that is really, really powerful. And speaking of powerful, I really appreciate you all coming out. I will literally never forget what it was like to get here and speak to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.